Hello there, and welcome back to War Thunder, to the tank review on the Italian high-tier SPA that is the OTOMATIC. The last video that I made was a very successful 45,000 views, but at the end of the day it was just a first impressions, and there was also quite a controversy. There was a lot of opinion on my behalf, and so this video will be different in that way that I will have a proper look at it. We'll compare this tank to a lot of the other tanks that are in the game, which might surprise you because a lot of people think that this is a very unique, completely overpowered tank. It can be very strong, there is no doubt about this, and in certain situations it is overpowered, but not in every single aspect, and it is at the end of the day still an SPA. So how to use it, how to set it up to do so, how to keep that amazing performance throughout the entirety of a battle, as well as a proper comparison to other tanks, and many more things shall be discussed in this review. The next thing is, I have so much footage from the over 220 battles that I played in this tank that I have very specialized footage, as well as then also enough material for follow-up videos, such as a kill compilation, of course, but also a in-depth tactical look in how to set the vehicle up, because this is a bit underestimated and not always necessary with other tanks. With this one, it is mandatory, especially to fight around caps. So that is the introduction, and now let's begin the tank review like usual, and we begin with the armor. In terms of armor protection, the OTOMATIC doesn't have any serious armor. In fact, there is no kind of spaced armor, composite armor, or ear protection backing up the rolled homogeneous armor. The lower glacis and the upper glacis are strong enough versus APDS from SPAs and also from the Bradley, the Warrior, and the BMP2, but everything else will punch clean through with APDS, with hash, heat, and normal AP and APHE without bigger problems. So there is not a lot of things that you can do. Also, the tank is very tall, a very big target. The hull furthermore does only have 30, 25 and 35 millimeters of armor. The engine deck as well as the rear are not very impressive. In fact, there is a part that is only 5 millimeters thick, so a biplane in theory with machine guns can damage you there and set you on fire and damage your engine. The turret itself is huge and also only 25 millimeters of protection. Well, at least the tank doesn't suffer from hull break, and that is a good thing. But one big downside here that is also in battle a massive advantage is the radar equipment. First of all, it gives you position away, it makes the tank very tall, very easy to spot, and the rotating bar here does the rest in making sure that everybody sees you if they have a line of sight. On the other hand, then let's talk about the X-ray, and there we can see that it is a mixed bag. Let's put it that way. First of all, we have a lot of ammunition, the frontal ammo rack, this ready rack, this ammo rack, and this ammo rack, so it's very certain that you get ammo racked quite often, and I still would keep the majority of shells. So to take out your ammunition doesn't really help you. The next thing is that the power pack is all in the back, so transmission, engine and fuel tanks are all in the back, and that leaves a lot of empty space in the hull. Okay, so then we have overall 4 crew members, the driver, the commander, the gunner, and the loader here in one row, so you can actually do a fairly certain crew knockout. In fact, the turret overall is a big hitting zone, especially from this side. You either hit the ammo rack, or the crew, or the gun breech. In particular, the gun breech is worth mentioning, that it is one of the biggest gun breaches that there is in the game, including the mouse, so it will catch a lot of shells. On the other hand, while it disables the tank takes no further damage. In fact, if you play it like this, a lot of people just aim directly for the gun breech and think they have scored a lethal blow, which is true because the tank has no further protection in terms of machine gun even, so this one gun is all that it has. And so the crew behind it actually profits from the gun breech absorbing all the damage. So on the other hand, a random shot also can disable the gun breech. I mean, look at that size. So keep that in mind, and now let's talk about something else, for example, the mobility. And as we can see, it is not bad. 18.0 horsepower per ton ratio for a technical SPA is kind of standard, although there are better ones, with a top speed of 65 km per hour and a good reverse gear of 25 km per hour supported by neutral steering. However, please notice that main battle tanks that you will very often run into, such as the Abrams, the Type 90 and the AMX 40, have horsepower to ton ratios in the 30 region. And so the actual speed that a lot of your opposition has is much higher, despite your top speed being on paper not that bad. However, on normal terrain you will just race with 40-45 km per hour, and downhill you again, even on a paved road, suffer from the gear shifting bug. So your actual top speed is something that you only see on paper. The reverse speed again is great for popping in and out of cover, not just versus tanks but also helicopters, and as in particular when they shoot with ATGMs. And the neutral steering, well, overall the tank just feels a little bit heavy. But that's okay, it is not a main battle tank, at least on paper. Now, finally, let's talk about the business end of the automatic, and that is the 76mm OTOMATIC 76-62 cannon. And this is, as far as I'm aware, for tanks, the highest caliber SPA in the game. And you unsurprisingly see that it also has the lowest amount of ammunition, with still only 90 rounds. However, I would still go into battle with the full complement. The reloads is an interesting story. I'm talking here about the clip reloads, not of the clip reload, but between the shells, the single shells. And then we have the slowest rate of fire with quote-unquote only 120 rounds per minute, or 0.5 second reload for an ace crew. And yes, the crew actually matters. The way that this is modeled is that your loader throws a shell into the gun breech every 0.5 seconds. And so if you have not a fully upgraded crew, in fact a completely stock crew reloads in 0.65 seconds. And so that is, I guess, 30% longer reload. In fact, even if you lose crew in the game and you're down to 2 crew members, the driver and the gunner, you reload every second or every 1.5 seconds, depending on your entire crew skills. And that makes a whole lot of difference. So the ZSU-57-2 actually has a faster reload rate, but then it has to suffer from the reload of an entire clip. So then we come to the turret rotation, the overall gun handling in fact, and it is not bad. It is actually main battle tank standard of 40 degrees per second, but compared to other SPAs, it is not really that great. The M247 and the ZSU-57-2 both clock in at 60 degrees per second, and the Type 87 representing here something like the Chieftain Marksman and the Gepard and similar SPAs clocks in at 90 degrees per second. So there are some variations between the mentioned SPAs, but in general you can see the automatic itself only has 40 degrees per second for an ace crew. Then we have the gun depression, -5. That is kind of standard. You shouldn't go over a ridgeline in the first place. It just gives your position away. You have to expose a big portion of your tank before you engage an enemy tank. Against aircraft, you actually have a little bit of a drawback of 60 degrees of elevation angle. Now this is good enough at long range, where this automatic is practically very important and strong. Again, more on this in a moment when we talk about the ammunition. However, in theory, you can see this is a way to counter the automatic coming from directly above. There is no way that you can actually deal with such an attacker, be it a helicopter, jet, biplane, you name it. On the other hand, in theory, you can wedge the tank up a steep inclination or a rock, something like this, to increase this elevation. The elevation speed is okayish with 20 degrees per second. That's good enough. You are not a high performance SPA in the sense of the gun handling. Now let's come back to the ammunition. Overall, we have 3 ammunition types. We begin with the 76/62 Syphon APHE round, and it has an amazing bursting charge of 662.4 grams of TNT equivalent. So when it penetrates, it deals massive damage. Also, the muzzle velocity with 910 meters per second is not really bad, but it's obviously nothing compared to a AP FSDS or APDS round. The penetration, on the other hand, with 60 millimeters initially, falling off quite substantially, is not the best. Also, the normalization is not the greatest, but it is a stock shell, and in particular versus lightly armored vehicles, or if you're very good and ambush the enemy for a side shot on some of the main battle tanks at close ranges, this is absolutely devastating. And even if you have unlocked all the ammunition, I still would keep a certain complement of those rounds for emergency purposes. You still can track a tank, you still can maybe try to shot trap him. You also maybe also can damage the gun barrel from the side or from the front if he has a muzzle brake, or you're very good with your aim. So this shell is a finishing off shell if you want to save other ammunition types. The second stock shell is the funnily named 7662H EMAM, and this proximity shell is very devastating versus everything that flies. Muzzle velocity of 910 meters per second, backed up by a bursting charge of just under 1 kilogram. That, in combination with the rate of fire, with the lead indicator that you have from your radar, and the 13 millimeters of penetration, makes it so devastating versus helicopters, versus aircraft, jets, planes, you name it. Everything that flies gets shredded by this. And again, it doesn't even need a direct hit. So you can even, and I'm not kidding, shoot down helicopters at ranges of up to 4.5 kilometers. So at a range of, don't quote me quite on this, but 4.6, 4.7 kilometers line of sight distance, the shells then self-destruct, and you can range find stationary helicopters, or if you're very good even when they're flying, with the laser rangefinder, which is very good, up to a range of 4.8 kilometers. And even though the lead indicator only begins with 2.5 kilometers, and in your sight, on your gun sight, the range goes to 2.8 kilometers. And with a bit of experience, with a bit of knowledge and a bit of patience and cold-blooded experience, you can make those shells work, and they are really devastating. In fact, and this is now a personal opinion, and don't quote me on this, but in my experience of the over 200 games that I played in this tank, the helicopter population, in particular on American teams, has drastically dropped, and I see more and more automatics. So a lot of the gameplay footage that you're about to see and that you already saw is from a time when there were more and more helicopters in the game. So in this case, I was cheering when there were helicopters in the match, and I was really cocky in chat and saying, "I see you," and please no, but they were doomed. If they wanted to get into gun range, in particular the AH-1Z, they were just doomed. And even those helicopters with ATGMs, they are mostly stationary when they shoot their ATGMs, and so you can laser range find them, clock in, and just barrage them down. You can see maybe a little bit of the footage right here, right there, and that is so satisfying, and that makes a massive difference and helps your team quite a lot. In particular, if you kill a helicopter pilot that spawns initially with his helicopter, in particular again the AH-1Z, then he's out of the match. You killed an entire player with all of his potential respawns, and this makes the automatic so powerful. Now let's come to the other really interesting shell, and that is the 7662 APF SDS round. Yes, this SPA actually fires as a tier 4 upgrade an APF SDS round, but as you can see, it is limited to only 12 rounds. Also, the gun is horribly inaccurate, especially if you continue your fire in a small burst. The shells go everywhere, so a sniper duel is not recommended. The performance of the APF SDS itself, well, it has a muzzle velocity of just under 1600 meters per second, so that is actually quite nice to lead an enemy, but to hit him, because of the inaccuracy of the gun at longer ranges, is quite questionable. The penetration itself is 311 millimeters, and with a positive normalization, that is not bad. However, versus serious main battle tanks such as the Abrams, the Type 90, the Leopard and so forth, you cannot go through the composite armor. On the other hand, you still can very reliable disable the gun breach. Thanks to your high rate of fire, you have multiple shots before the enemy can effectively fire at you. And then also the follow-up shots, if you switch them to the APHE for tracking and then finishing off with the side shot or going through the universal weak spot that is just under the gun breach, this is where it is really, really great. Again, this is meant as a self-defense round, and everything else is just abusing the system, but you know, it's the War Thunder community who doesn't love to abuse a tank once in a while. Now, it is this limitation to 12 rounds that brings a little bit of balance into it, but also this dictates your playstyle around and inside a capture zone. In conjunction with your ready rack that is limited to 20 or 21 rounds, you are very well advised to stay in a cap and constantly refill and to fight. Use also your smoke to cover yourself, and then you can deal with helicopters, you can deal with aircraft, you can deal with tanks, you have the performance, you have the steady supply of AP-FSTS, and this is where the tank then gets really, really brutal in the hands of a capable player. If you put a noob into this tank and he just rushes straight face first into the enemy, then he gets killed. And there is nothing that he can do. He gets disabled and finished off by any single tank that there is with ease. So it is really down to the player to actually get the performance out of the tank. As it is good tradition, the last Excel spreadsheet here is the ammunition comparison, and at first let's have a look at the APHE. So it doesn't have the highest penetration, that goes to the ZSU-57-2, which is then its main shell, but the bursting charge is absolutely devastating. So if you manage to hit the crew compartment and pen it, it's a one-shot kill, no doubt about this. The muzzle velocity is still decent. Then we come to the HE. In this comparison, it's actually the best. The HE mum, the mother of all HE shells, I just love this name, has the highest penetration and still a decent muzzle velocity, and also the bursting charge is the biggest here in this comparison, but what makes it really great is the proximity fuse, as you could see previously. Then we come to the actual armor piercing, or the high penetration rounds of each given tank, and there you can see 311 millimeters is nearly doubling or tripling here the Type 87 and the Begleitpanzer 57, which are in this comparison the best. So yeah, it is quite devastating, but again, the inaccuracy, the limitation to only 12 rounds, that dictates your playstyle around and inside of a capture zone, and that is just very, very important to know. Also, it doesn't have any machine gun or any ATGM to back it up. Now, unlike with a lot of the other tank reviews, I specifically have to point out the upgrade way as well, since a lot of the overall tank's performance, in particular at high tier for a knowledgeable player, is hidden with some of the upgrades. First of all, fairly standard parts and FPE. After that, it is debatable if you want to go for the adjustment of fire, since the accuracy is not really great as well, and you never should go into a sniper duel as well, and versus aircraft a little bit of spread is compensated of course here by the proximity fuse in the first place. The horizontal drive and the elevation mechanism are actually not that important, but since you are fighting in capture zones in the first place and are very often exposed, get yourself the smoke grenades. They help you quite a lot, and your team comrades. I cannot tell you how effective they always were in this tank. After that, you also can think about the crew replenishment, and because if you go down to only 2 crew members, this hurts the tank's rate of fire like any other, but in this particular tank where it's so important, this is also important. And once you unlock rank 4, obviously straight go for the AP-FSTS and make that your primarily shell type, since then it gets always refilled first in the capture zone. If you have not seen in the video, or if you have not paid attention, I tell it to you right now again. After that, get the laser rangefinder. It is so important, it is so helpful. You can actually range find not just stationary but also flying helicopters if you're good, and that helps you to actually determine if it is worth firing at a helicopter, if he is even in range of the proximity fuse shells or not, and also then to get more accurate bursts of either stationary helicopter that is lingering around between 3 and 4 kilometers. So then after that also the artillery support, and then you can go for the engine and the transmission, then the tracks, then the filters, then the suspension brake system. So that's it with this upgrade. Now let's talk about how to play the tank tactically. So now we come to the tactical part of the video after 19 minutes, 20 minutes already. I know it's going late, but I will also make an in-depth video about this, but briefly I can summarize it here hopefully and give you a general idea what I'm talking about, so then you can roughly go into battle and know what to do. Again, this part is not straightforward since it is a little bit counterintuitive, and we start at the beginning of the match. Where do you spawn? Well, you spawn there where the majority of your team spawns, so you are one amongst many tanks, and you just refuse to lead the charge. You are not a frontline tank, you are an excellent support vehicle in terms of killing enemies, and in particular you should immediately watch out for the helicopters and deal with them. Now, dealing with the helicopters itself is specialized science field in the first place, but you can observe them. What do? Do they just hang around and wait, or do they rush in? Do they try to make some funny things like shooting ATGMs from long range? Adapt to this. If they rush in, just wait till they are close enough and you don't scare them away with missing your proximity fuse shells. And that also means that you don't waste too many proximity fuse shells. Again, back to this in just a moment. So the beginning of the match is very conservatively played and very carefully, very defensively. Now when it comes to a fight around the capture zone, you obviously want to get some kills, and that is fine. In fact, securing a capture zone is so fundamentally important. I cannot really point out how much important it is for the long duration performance of this vehicle. So you get the cap and then you stay in the cap. You refill your ready rack to the maximum, where you can use the X-ray key binding to just manually watch how many rounds are in there, and then also obviously refill your stock amount of APFSDs. Furthermore, if you stay in the cap and you get damaged, you repair twice as fast. You also can replenish your crew, and you can constantly smoke up, which is very, very helpful as well, especially if you have multiple alleys to watch over. You just smoke up one and concentrate on the tank that's coming around the other corner and just blast him, and then smoke up that area. When the smoke is refilled, you can smoke up multiple times before one smoke runs out, and then concentrate on the other tank. As an ambush predator, this tank is very, very devastating, and always remember to watch out if there is anything flying around. If you just remove this part from the game as a threat to your team, you help your team so much. This I cannot stress out how important it is. So first in line, you are a defensive unit, you are an anti-aircraft, anti-helicopter, anti-jet unit, and you have to excel at this. Again, the lead indicator has to be led. Again, if the enemy is too far away and makes evasive actions, you are never going to hit him anyway, even with proximity fuse shells. While they are very, very good, they are not magic, they are not an auto win button. A general idea is that the vehicle is very good in a 1 versus 1 situation, but it is not really great in sniper duels versus other main battle tanks, in particular if you only see their turret and they can fire back at you, and so you are throwing away many advantages that you have. Always remember the bad accuracy of your gun, even fully upgraded. The next thing is that the longer you are alive, the better you are, the better you become, and the more difficult it is for the enemy team to counter you, since then they have less numbers of players to surprise you, and that is just very devastating. Again, you can face everything: helicopters, planes, and tanks. Every single way of dealing with the enemy has to be refined, and you need to gain experience by yourself at the end of the day. But you have all the tools in the world. You have the rate of fire, you have the ammunition types, you have the gun handling, the mobility. Everything is decent to average to really great. It's just down to the player to not waste it in one stupid way or the other. And before you notice it, you will get one of those epic games. So as you could see in the gameplay, the patience paid off, and also always trying to stay in cover is very important. Now in this case, one of the enemy chats shows a weakness. I assume he knows that I'm there and what I am, and there you can see the limitation for an SPA with the maximum elevation angle of only 60 degrees, quote unquote only 60, while being sufficient for most helicopters and planes if they're a fair distance away. This guy just showed how quote-unquote easy it is to counter me. If now I have a second SPA such as a Gepard or a Type 87 with me, one of the other SPAs that have up to 85 degrees of elevation, then it looks quite different, and then there is nothing an enemy aircraft can effectively do. Again, a reminder, I will probably make a second video on this specific vehicle in terms of a kill compilation, including some of the clips that are already shown, since, you know, not everybody can to be asked to watch that video and that video because of that video. And of course, I want to make an in-depth, well, tactical guide where I just visualize that more with scenes that last multiple minutes to understand what I thought and how I executed that plan, and how it worked out or how it didn't work out, because that's always something that you have to take into consideration, not only looking at the successes but also learning from your mistakes. And with that said, that brings this battle now more or less to an end. I held C, that's the best that I could do. I cleaned quite a little bit of the mess that the enemy team was creating. I made sure that there are no aircraft flying around and no helicopters. That gave my team a big advantage, and there you can see there are only overall 4 tanks, including me, alive. If one of the helicopters or the aircraft, whatever, including the tanks, would have succeeded a bit more, the enemy team eventually would have won this. So with 4 destroyed tanks and 3 helicopters, I think I did here my job. Now our team secures the final cap, ticking the last few tickets of the enemy down, and that's a victory for us and the best squad. And actually, funnily enough, no survivor for me, because one of the enemy team had actually more tank kills, including 3 aircraft kills. What a shame. So this is how difficult it actually is to get the survivor award. For my efforts with a premium account without the talisman, that was a battle without the talisman, I got quite a lot, 35,000 silver lines and 6,126 research points, and on top of this 30,000 silver lines. So that's it for me today. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Let me know in the comments if this was a helpful review in knowing how to take it out, how to counter it, and if this is actually something that you want to go for. And give this video a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see each other in the skies, on the waves, and on the battlefields of War Thunder.